So this is how you add it on iPhone. And then on Android. Okay, thanks everyone. So let me jump straight to our panelists. Each panelist brings a unique perspective and expertise to the table. They've all made significant contributions to their respective fields and are true change makers. Today, we'll hear their thoughts on what it means to be a change maker or what it means to them, and how they have made a difference in their own journeys. So let's start with our first panelist, Marjo. Marjo, please introduce yourself to the group.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Marjo Ipalane. I was born French, but I became British a year and a half ago. I was raised by a single mother of four, coming from a low social economic background. Our role models were more cleaners and teachers. I'm here today because I have a lot to talk about the topic. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion. I was working in tech previously at Pinterest. My last day was on Friday, and I will be joining Zinc as a founder in a couple of weeks' time. Being a change maker is really important for me. It's someone that to push the boundaries, as Olu was saying, someone that also is not afraid of challenging the status quo. So I'm delighted to be sharing the panel with you as well today.
Thank you, Marjo. So just to summarize, you're an accomplished professional. You're a passionate advocate for the influence of good role models. And you believe that a good change maker challenges the status quo. And yeah, I guess you also probably think that they shouldn't be afraid to hear no a lot. So I think you're a great person to have on this panel. Next, we've got Theo. Theo, please take the mic.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, everyone. I'm Theo. I'm currently at LinkedIn working in a product marketing role. And I think I'd just like to start by saying everyone, all the panelists that you can see here have impacted my career already. So it's really important for me to be able to come here and speak and just talk about my experiences so far. And what I see as being a change maker is really just someone that can have a positive impact. And I think it could be a social impact, an environmental impact, whatever impact it is, but I think you need to be passionate and determined to see that impact come through. And I think for me personally, like a social impact is really important to me. So as you can see, I'm Black. And I think I've been able to navigate the corporate world relatively well with lots of help from places like Colorintech and BLIX. And I think it's important that we keep that door open and create new doors. So I'm just excited to be here today and talk about my journey and then help anyone else I can.
Thanks, Theo. So another trailblazer. I feel like, meeting you, you're very dynamic in nature, and that's helped shape your career with like a lasting impact, right? So last but not least, we have Catherine. Catherine, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Apologies if I look slightly exhausted. Just got in from Reading because one of the roles that we do is helping students into tech, and we were actually at a careers fair today supporting students even further. So who am I? I am the community and events lead here at Colorintech, and our aim is to make the tech industry more inclusive and equitable, and we do that in a number of ways, which I'm sure I'll go on to talk about later on. But for me, a change maker, I believe everyone has the ability to be a change maker as a start, and that if there is a change that you want to see, typically change makers act on that belief on what that needs to be, to make the world a better place and to bring people along for the journey. Like, I tend to find that change makers are people that inspire and bring people along and encourage and empower other people towards that more positive change, towards that impact that Theo mentioned earlier. But yeah, excited to be on this panel and excited to speak further.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. So again, to summarize, you are a leader yourself. I know you personally as well, and you've dedicated your career to driving change. So with Colorintech, you're going to make waves in the industry and beyond. So thanks to our panelists for introducing themselves. I have got a kickoff question. For those who joined the WhatsApp, you might have already seen. We've got a few answers for this already, but I'm going to go straight to Marsha. So please share with the audience who your favorite fictional changemaker is.
So it's a difficult one because I feel that I'm going to say something a bit obvious. I love Black Panther and Shuri in particular, who I found in the first one very smart, challenging the status quo of being a scientist, someone doing research in a world that is not necessarily accepting what she's doing, but she's still pushing forward with a lot of innovation and ideas. And I liked her personality, and she kind of like push the needle a little bit. And obviously there's Black Panther too, but I think that would be for me like the fictional character that comes to mind. I wish there was like a lot of characters I could pick from, but that's like the first one that came to mind.
Great answer. Okay, so I'm also going to ask a slightly tweaked question for Theo. If you could have any superpower to help you make a change, what would it be and why?
Probably time travel. Quite an obvious one, but I think maybe naively, if you was there in certain moments, you'd be able to make a change. So I think if there was any superpower you could use to make a change, time travel is one that could put you in the right place at the right time. I'd probably also like to tell my family to like invest in Amazon and Microsoft and a few other things. I had time travel. So for me, definitely time travel. And the why is because sometimes we miss opportunities. And I think time travel would give us a second chance at some of those.
Another good answer. So that leaves us with Catherine, and I'm going to throw a curveball in here. AI is a big topic at the moment, so let's introduce some AI to this topic. If you could create your own AI, what would the AI do?
Great question, and actually a really difficult one because it's trying to think of one that hasn't already been started to be worked on as the AI industry is growing so massively. Personally, I'm a huge reader. If you know me in the office, I've always got a book with me. In fact, my current favorite of the year is probably the Parables Geology by Octavia Butler, if anybody's looking for a good read. But with that in mind, what I really love is the worlds that are built within books and the kind of imagination that comes from authors. So if I could create my own AI, it would be to kind of bring together that imagery that is described in the book and kind of make it a visual reality so I can kind of see and live in it and as the way that the author intended. So yeah, kind of a visual world generator for books, which would definitely be my one and hopefully would inspire many people.
Excellent. Well, I feel like we've introduced ourselves. We've kind of kept it lighthearted at the start, but I think it's time we should jump into our main discussion, the reason we're all here. What I'd like to do is explore the impact of a change. Our panelists here, you guys have experienced or spearheaded in the past. I'm gonna jump to Marjorie again. Maybe you could start by setting the scene and sharing the impact of a change you've been a part of. Just before you start, following your insights, I will just make it an open discussion for all of the panelists to share their experiences. I'm encouraging you guys to reflect on the impacts that you've made and how it's influenced your particular field. I think it's through these stories that we can learn from one another and find some inspiration to make our own mark. So yeah, so Marjorie, I'll repeat that. you know, is there a change you've experienced or spearheaded in the past that, you know, you can share what the impact of that was?
Yeah, I think so. I like to talk about the change that I experienced, but also the change I drove. And there's a couple of stories about change that I experienced that really shaped who I am today. When I was younger, I was actually a breakdancer trained by Bibish, who was part of the rock steady crew. And it's very athletic. And I remember saying to her, so who do you look up to as a female competitor? Like, who is your inspiration? And she looked at me and she said, look, I'm not looking at if you're a woman or if you're an alien or if you're, look at Junior. He has an handicap. He's one of the best b-boy in the world. Do I look at if he has an handicap? No, I just look at the best examples that you have. This helped my career in terms of changing perception. Because when you come from diversity, you're in a box. You'll be told, oh, you know, the social ladder, it's really difficult to climb because you probably will end up like your parents, more or less, in terms of like job categories. So this was like one of the first change that really shaped my mind in terms of like when I went to developing my career, who I look up to without limiting myself. That was like one of the examples I had in mind. The second example was changing settings. When you're coming from an underrepresented category, low social economic background, it's very difficult to see different perspective because you're so in that bubble again. And I was lucky enough to move to the US as an au pair for a year in a host family that really changed my life. It was really interesting for me to just be shocked of like opening the fridge, full fridge. And my host family, so the mom was, and she still is a doctor. The host dad was a helicopter pilot. They gave me a different way like of seeing I guess, social economic classes and really impacting my vision of what I can do, giving me more hope, vision, or what's possible. So that really changed a lot of things in my life, and also hiring. I've been lucky enough to have amazing mentors that hired me, whereas I didn't have everything on paper, gave me an opportunity. So all of this foundation of change of perception, giving me a change, also led to me spearheading some initiative. Like in my last job, I co-founded an ERG, and I recommend anyone to be really involved in ERGs because that's really great to drive diversity and inclusion. It was called United Voices, and we were running chats like this where we were really sharing ideas, empowering each other, supporting each other. And when I moved to Pinterest, I spoke with someone that used to work in my company, and he said, oh, you know, one thing that I really loved in that last company is we were having those sessions with United Voices. I felt like not alone. He was coming from an Asian background. And during COVID, it was really tough for that community. And what he shared with me was really, I did not realize the impact of what I was doing with this ERG until someone said, you know, this made me feel like included. This made me feel like I can count on someone. I'm not alone. And you may not realize straight away what you're doing can impact lives like this. But yeah, that's like what I'll share on the back of your question.
Yeah, so to our other panelists, thank you so much, Margot. Thank you. So Theo, do you want to pick up on that point as well and talk a little bit about your experience with maybe BLIX or Colorintech or something? Yeah.
I think in terms of change, I'm still quite early in my career, and the way I've been able to enact change has been like low touch point. So I'm not at the stage yet where I'm hiring a team. When I am, I'll tell you there will be a very diverse team I hire. But I'm at the point where I can get 10 LinkedIn messages and respond to every single one. I'm at the point where the way I can enact change is to give my time when I have it, and if I don't have it, make some. And it can never be for everyone, but as many people as I can. So that's how I think I'm in a position to enact change. But change I've experienced I've been quite lucky. So I was graduating university and I decided I wanted to work in tech. That's a big statement to make. And especially without the internships and the work experience. My work experience was at BLIX, which isn't around anymore, but that's where I did my work experience. So I wasn't necessarily well prepared to work in tech, but I found Colorintech at this point. And at that point, they gave me all the tools I could need to work in tech. I didn't know much, but I joined a few courses and I said, this is what I want to do. I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. Thought I wanted to be a designer, and I don't want to be a designer now. I found out about product marketing through Colorintech, and I really just made the most of it. So sometimes you have to make the change yourself because it's not always going to come to you. So you have to make sure you reach out, you send the messages, you follow up. And through Colorintech, I was able to, I don't think I would have even known if eBay had a graduate scheme. And through Colorintech, I found that out. And then I made sure I did everything I could do to get on that graduate scheme through assessment centers, etc. And Colorintech was a catalyst for change for me, because I went from believing I wanted to do something to actually starting my first real working life on a graduate scheme with eBay. And then further than that, once I got in there, I realized that I wanted to go further. Then I found BLIX. So things kind of happened by chance, but also you're always looking for these things. And BLIX again helped change my career and accelerate it. So BLIX has an amazing group of mentors that will offer you free time. So literally you put time in and you can speak to a director from Google, a director from Facebook, a director from Apple, and they're just giving you their time for free. And it's literally a one-to-one conversation. I know we've all had probably skip level meetings where they're on Teams or Slack while they're talking to you. All the ones I had with BLIX, it was 100% concentration for 30 minutes. And they were big catalysts for change in my career as well, from wanting to move job to being told, you've been here for 2 months, maybe you should stay a bit longer, to other things maybe it can feel a bit awkward when you're not used to. So I don't go to the pub. I can't do it. I still don't do it. I've tried. It's not for me. But I've been able to, through BLIX and through different mentors from BLIX, find out other ways I can make sure I'm present and visible in the places I want to be visible. So I think change has come from those two perspectives, me being able to give back where I can in whatever way I can. So if it might just be a chat, it might be a send me your CV, I'll look at it. And I always remember that I'm looking at their CV because someone else showed me their CV. So it all just follows on. And then also lucky enough to be partnered with and be involved with two great organizations like BLIX and Colorintech.
Awesome. Thank you, Theo. And last but not least, Catherine.
Yeah, how do I follow that? I mean, amazing answer there, Theo. And it's actually genuinely been a privilege to kind of even though I've only been a small part of your journey so far through Colorintech, but to hear about everything you've done is amazing. And I also want to kind of highlight on this as well of what Theo has said in terms of that desire and that tenacity to just go and say, I want more. And that desire to go, okay, I'm going to go put myself in these spaces. I'm going to find these people and I'm going to get involved. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier of be the change you want to see in terms of, you go, okay, I don't see people doing what I'm currently doing and I want to do that. Go do it. Go find the spaces, go find the right network, join places like the BLIX app, join communities like Colorintech, and be okay, I'm going to find someone who can help, who can mentor me, who can be that inspiration. And I think that a lot of that also comes from, society is general. We've got, if we think of business, if we think of entrepreneurs, what's the usual that comes to mind, right? Richard Branson, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. I still remember doing entrepreneurship back at uni years ago now, but I still remember doing it, and every single example was from one of those three or somebody very similar, and thinking there must be other people, right? There must be someone who looks like me, who feels like me, who is part of what I want to be doing as well in terms of social entrepreneurship. And I remember speaking to some of the other students, and I was working a lot around schools at the time as well with various jobs I was doing. And a lot of young people were saying, oh, you know, tech is not accessible to me. Like, oh no, tech is not this for me. In fact, even today at the careers fair, the amount of people who came was like, oh no, tech feels too daunting. Oh no, I'm not going to join tech. I'm like, no, tech is for everyone. The world of the future is going to be tech. But it's going, okay, then how do we make it seem less daunting? How do we put change makers who are in the space already front and center and going, look at the amazing things we're doing? It's not just Richard Branson, it's, you know, it's Marjo, it's Theo, it's the wonderful people who already exist in the space and telling their stories, so that more people can be inspired to also make that jump, make that leap, you know, apply for the eBay grad scheme, apply for the Zinc venture fund program, you know. And that we do that by championing people such as the two wonderful other panelists on this call. In fact, it reminds me of something I spearheaded very early on in my career, when from a lot of these conversations, I decided, okay, well, enough is enough, right? And I networked and found like 10 different women from various different backgrounds. And I said, would you be on a panel to talk about your experience in business, to kind of inspire a room full of other women to kind of go into business, to start their own or become a corporate leader? And it did so well. We had like 150 people in the audience that just listening to these stories. And actually later on down the line, one of the attendees ended up messaging me a few months down the line, as I said, and they said that they actually changed the degree that they were going to go do. Originally, they were going to go study German as a language, and now they were studying German and management based on, like, she felt able to do it and that she wanted to go into business. And I was like, yes, amazing. And that came from, you know, showcasing different people, showcasing diversity. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, panelists. So I was thinking about all your answers, and you know, everyone's got now a flavor of your background, what's brought you to this point. And I think for our audience, it's really important that we discuss why it's important today to push for change, especially if you're an underrepresented employee or founder. So with that, I'd like to ask Theo maybe to kick this discussion off. You know, I value your perspective as someone who's championed change as an underrepresented individual. So after, you know, Theo, you've given your input, we'll open it up to the rest of the panelists to share their perspective on the importance of pushing for change in today's society.
Thanks. I think whenever I talk about this, I like to make sure I make it clear that it's not necessarily our job. I don't think when we join a company, we're not getting paid to be a diversity consultant. We're getting paid to do our job. And I think it's always important to state that, because lots of us are going to have the inclination anyway to want to help and want to do things. But it's important to remember whenever we can to tell leadership, to tell whoever we can that I'm not a diversity consultant and you should pay someone to take you through a proper process to do this properly. And there are companies that exist run by underrepresented people, diverse people to do this job. And I just like, whenever I talk about it, to start by saying, if there is anyone in that position, don't ask for employees, go and seek the proper thing and pay for it. Because if you really want change, like most things in this world, it has a cost. But just moving on from that, I think for me, change is important because I wouldn't have been here without change. I wouldn't have been working what is more or less a dream job at LinkedIn without the change that those organizations I spoke about gave me the opportunity to. There was also change from lots of individual people, like literally random people that would respond to my LinkedIn messages, or a random person I met at an event and decided to talk to you. So I think change is important because people open the door for us. And I mentioned it earlier, but I think maybe opening the door isn't always even enough, because that's one door. But if anyone that's been through the process like me, we know that there might be a door, but there's also loads of barriers before the door. And I think the way we'll really see change in the future is by just breaking the walls down. We just have to say, forget the doors, forget everything else. We need to say, we're doing it from scratch. And the only way I think we can do that is by getting into positions of power as such. So I mentioned it before, but at my level, I can't hire a team, unfortunately, maybe soon. But what I can do is respond to people whenever I can. And when I do get there, make sure I'm making the change. So it's up to me to make sure I get there so I can make the change and be the change I want to see. Because there's only so much you can tell your leadership teams to do. And the other thing I would just really say about change, especially within big matrix organizations, is data. So whenever I've had the opportunity to talk about change within LinkedIn or eBay, I've said, can we measure it? Or how do we do this? Because when it comes to my performance review, we talk about data and measurement, and nothing's going to change in a tech organization without data and measurement. So I think whatever you try to drive, make sure you do it in a measurable way. And sometimes you hear like, oh, you can't measure X or you can't measure Y, but they'll figure out a way. It might be, we need to hire 20 diverse people this year. Fine. Oh, but there's not 20 diverse people with the right qualifications. Okay, well, then that means we need to go and educate the people that we want to see. There's always a way forward. And I think if we use data and measure it, we give leadership teams a more difficult problem. And it makes them, they have to come and say to you, listen, we just don't care enough, which some won't and some don't. But as long as we do things rooted in data, I think we allow ourselves to like be a catalyst for change, because we give them less reason to say no. Or if they do say no, it has to be a very straight up, honest no. So I think for me, it's about opening doors and breaking down walls and just helping whoever asks you for help. And obviously there's probably better way to scale it, which is why we've got BLIX and Colorintech here, two amazing things. I can't speak to 100,000 people, but I'm sure Colorintech has spoken to more than that already. So I think just be the change you want to see and just hold people accountable within your organization, but don't do the job they should pay someone to do. It's the only other thing I would end on.
Can I jump in on this one? Absolutely agree with you there, Theo. And I think what's also worth mentioning in terms of paying someone to do it, I mean, put your money where your mouth is, right? Especially when it comes to diversity. But also, I think it's worth noting about performative allyship and actually the damage it can do. So it's challenging these organizations and it's challenging leadership to be like, are you actually doing this work correctly, and are you actually doing it with the mindset of improvement, or are you just doing it as a tick box? I mean, the famous example is the Black Square saga, right? If we remember, after the murder of George Floyd, and then we saw every single brand under the sun putting a black square on Instagram, which then gives the illusion, oh, all these organizations are so, are helping Black employees, or, things are changing, when actually, if you look at the statistics between then and now, there's actually been less funding going to Black-owned businesses since before then, which is shocking in itself. So, but it seems that there's more being done, and yeah. So I think it's worth kind of bearing in mind that performative element, and just kind of saying, if an organization is going to be an ally, if it's saying it's going to have DEI policies that are there to benefit employees, one, they're absolutely right, get somebody who knows what they're talking about and is paid to do that, to support, but also actually put the work in to do it. Or else you're leading to getting wonderful talent into the organization and leading to, further exclusion within the organization, which leads to a whole host of other problems, both on an individual level and on a company level. But yeah, on a different side note, which is hopefully more positive, is looking at, so the reason why as well that we kind of push for change, I mean, there's kind of two aspects that really shine out to me here. Firstly, kind of that supporting the next generation. I mean, if we look at the amount that's changed between, baby boomers to now, I mean, there's been huge changes, and we're seeing more diversity in the workforce. We're seeing more globalization happening for companies where we're accessing whole new areas of talent that, it's important to see that that's going to continue to change, and that's going to continue to move forward. So if that's the case, then we need to be supporting the younger generation to be moving with that and to be moving positively. And, most young people are aware of this as well. I mean, I did a focus group for a previous organization, and we were talking about recruitment and the reasons why, you know, younger talent would go into companies. And she candidly said to me that if she was ever applying for jobs, she would go onto the website of the company and look for the SLT or the senior leadership and say, does anybody here look like me? And if it was no, she wouldn't apply, because she was like, clearly the organization does not care enough about the needs that I have, or, you know, diversity enough, because there isn't diversity in the places where it matters, which is higher up for the organization. And that's quite powerful, you know, for somebody who, you know, is still at university and still thinking about where their career is going to go. And she's saying, I'm not going to apply unless I can kind of see that change has already started, is powerful, because, well, I mean, I don't think I need to emphasize it anymore. I think everybody knows why. So yeah, supporting the next generation and making sure that they feel able to also make that change for the future and to make those next steps. But then also in that, there's a level of understanding kind of that increasing diversity within society and intersectionality as well. And kind of coming back to kind of what Theo was saying earlier, in terms of, yes, we need to understand and support everyone, and also when we get it wrong, to kind of listen, understand, and do better, right? But it's also to understand that individuals are more than just their race, their gender, their sexuality, their disability. And just because you have diverse talent, it doesn't mean you have to showcase them every October for Black History Month, right? What diversity is having a panel generally on AI and having a good diverse panel as part of that. So it is kind of understanding that, and that people are multifaceted in that subject, and yeah, they're more than just their diversity characteristics, I suppose. But yeah, no, hopefully that made sense as a little spiel. But no, Marjo, I'm interested to hear what you have to say as well.
Well, a lot on the back of what you both shared. Where to start? Why change is important? I think I echo what you said earlier, Catherine, about paving the way for future generations. I was lucky enough to meet amazing people in my career that really shaped who I am today. And it kind of, especially as I'm moving to a founder, entrepreneur role, it's also shaping my North Star and my values, kind of like Theo, you were telling about giving back. I think that's really a personal value, which it's really important to be able to, if someone reach out to you, you may not be able, depending on the quantity of emails you get every day, but if you can open a door, yes, I'll try to do it. If I can give some perspective, like I have a dozen of years of experience in tech and media, so I get a lot of people, I chat a lot with a lot of people, but connecting people and helping them having intros, this can change a lot as well. So yeah, for me, I would say very important to pave the way for future generation. And Theo, I like what you said about breaking walls. I think we need to write new rules as well, because yes, data is important, but I'm sure you wouldn't mind me sharing this on a recorded video. But when I launched this ERG, I had a chat with the CFO of the company, because he was like, look, I challenged the company's numbers, saying, look, we need more diverse people in the company. It was a tech software company. And he was like, well, actually, looking at the benchmark, we're doing very well. And I remember saying, is this really your benchmark? Because in tech, for me, it's already low. So it's always back to perspective, breaking the walls and not staying in this box that I was talking earlier about. That's why it's important for me, giving the strength, the hope, giving back something to people that will push the needle. And especially coming from an underrepresented background, if you know how hard it is to climb the social ladder, like you kind of want to help people on the way, right? So yeah, that's what I would say, just to echo some of the things you've both said as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Pamela. So I really resonated with, why, this is so important. We want to encourage people not only to see themselves as change makers, but to, very much understand why it's important. So thank you again for your answers. Before we move on to Q&A, there is one more question, which I want to be much more kind of action-based from all of you. So I would like to hear your response to, what you think could be some actionable steps, so we can get more represented role models in all types of organizations. Catherine, you'd be a good person to lead with on this. As someone you've made such strides in this area, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. Yeah, just to give everybody a bit of a background as well, I've been in social impact for pretty much all of my career. So it's a long time of kind of understanding, like, how do we get more underrepresented role models, but in various different areas to kind of inspire and empower people forward. And I think it really comes down to the crux of four different words that I've got it down as, and it's to listen, to action, to collaborate, and to connect. Now, to go into those further, I think, like, listening, it's giving the appropriate platforms, and emphasis on appropriate. Again, going back to what Theo's point earlier was, don't just get all your diverse members of the company and put them in the room and then go and put generalized questions of, well, how do we get more people like you in the organization, right? Because that's not appropriate. But kind of having those appropriate platforms to bring people together and to listen to how you can improve, basically, and to understand that you don't have the answers, and that's okay. Particularly making sure that you kind of get multiple different, like, areas of diversity involved as well. I think there was a really great example actually in a book called Invisible Women, if anybody's read it. If you haven't, I recommend it. It's about data bias in the workplace. And there was a great example of one of the senior leaders at Google who made a comment on the lack of pregnancy parking available at the office, and how she would drive into work and there would be no parking available to her, and so she'd have to do a 15-minute walk before even starting her day when she was 7 months pregnant. And it's not something that the senior leadership team had ever thought about before, but they gave her the platform to be able to speak and share her concerns, and then they made the action, which leads on to my second point. So a lot of it is, as I mentioned earlier, put your money where your mouth is and actually take action on what you intend to do. It's all great, as Marjo said earlier, having statistics of, oh, well, we want 50% of our workforce to be women, but what are you actually doing to do that? And also kind of deep dive into those a bit more, right? So if you're saying you want 50% of your workforce to be women, is that, or, people from Black, Asian, or ethnic minority backgrounds, or if you want LGBTQ employees involved, are you having them at, the lowest level of management, or are you having them in decision-making roles, or are you having them in senior leadership? Like, really analyze where your diversity is within your organization as well, and if they're actually able to make change to encourage more diversity throughout. My next point was collaboration. I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn, I'm often going on about, collaboration over competition, especially when you're looking at social impact. Because at the end of the day, our aim is to kind of make the world a better place for everyone. And so that shouldn't be a competition to do. There is space for everyone, and there is space for improvement everywhere. So it's understanding that to move forward with that collaboration is better. We're stronger as a unit than we are individually, and we don't want to kind of monopolize impacts, I suppose. But it's also, as well, it's understanding with that as well in mind, is that one organization can't do everything, hence that importance for collaboration. Like, for example, at Colorintech, we do focus on ethnic minorities, even though we kind of try to support everyone. But that's why we purposefully partner with organizations that support LGBTQ groups. We purposefully support people who help neurodivergent individuals, who help people with religious backgrounds. Like, we partner together to make that difference. And then lastly, and it kind of goes in line with collaboration, but it's also connecting, right? I think a lot of the stories, especially given over earlier from Marjo and Theo, it's their ability to go into a space and meet people and network and connect with them and go, can we have a further conversation? Can you help me with this? Can we work together on this? Because, you know, that's what leads to change. I mean, we're working really hard here at Colorintech to make sure that all of our spaces have networking abilities, especially if they're in person, and that we make sure that the space is safe for everybody to come in, and that there's no judgment, and that, you know, even if it's your first time or your 50th time networking, you can come in and you can meet someone, and then hopefully that leads to something positive for you afterwards. So yeah, to kind of summarize, listen, action, collaborate, and connect.
Thank you, Catherine. And Marjo or Theo, what action do you think, what actions do you think we can take going forward?
Do you want to go? Well, I'll go. There's a couple of things I think we can all do, because of course organization can do things, but I really believe, like what Catherine, you said earlier, be the change you want to see. And again, as I'm going to build a business, I'll be able to shape the culture of the company with my co-founder. And I think it all starts with individual and do small steps wherever you are in your career. Like Theo was saying, take a call, answer an email, try to connect with someone. So giving back is one small thing you can do. I think leading by example is also something that's really important, and paving the way for others. I remember when I was at Warner Media, someone that became one of my mentors, is running BBC Children now. She was hosting a meeting, so C-level was hosting a meeting with a really important partner. We were talking about multi-million-pound deal. And I don't even know why I was invited. I was the most junior in the team, all were VP and above, very senior people with 20 years of experience. The type of meeting when you go around and you look at like someone is speaking, a question came up and I had a technical expertise on something. She gave me the opportunity to speak. This for me is the type of action that you can provide, give a seat at the table of someone that deserves it. I think, you know, as you evolve, I've been lucky enough also to be able to hire a team, very diverse team, built from scratch. That's the type of thing, as you become a leader, you can really give back. But wherever you are in the journey, I think you have an opportunity to push for change. And we talked about support network. I wish I had a BLIX or a Colorintech in my career. I actually, which is not really great, but I kind of turned down help for a while because I was kind of proud. Like, I think it was proud, you know, thinking, why I don't really need help. Like, I'm not coming from a place where, you know, no, I don't need your intro. I can do it by myself. And then I realized, well, actually, an intro is making sure that it's not a computer that sees your CV. So let's relax about this. It doesn't mean that we are opening up, like we're giving you an opportunity to talk to someone. And changing perspective as well, like being surrounded with really diverse people coming from very different environment, I think is really important also to shape and help people having more represented role model in organization.
Marjo and Theo.
I think for me, I kind of, it's similar on the similar lines of being the change you want to see, but every organization I've been in, one of the first things I've done is go on LinkedIn and see how many Black people are in the company. When I go in the office, I'm counting how many I see. And I think when I joined LinkedIn, I was able to see straight away 3 or 4 like people in senior positions. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, I'm saying 3 or 4 in a big company, which isn't a lot, but it lets you know what it's actually like. And I remember thinking, wow, okay. I remember I was in a meeting with one of them really early on, and I was in the meeting looking at him like, wow, he's really senior. And I think so. A way that I see myself being able to like actionable make change is get there myself. I think that's one thing. I saw someone in a position that I thought I really want to be one day, and that just told me, let's keep going, let's keep working. And I think so for me, step one for me to show actionable change is to get to the places I want to be at. get to the places I want to see. Like, so when Marjorie says she started a company, to me, that's so inspiring, because when I was looking, I wanted to be a founder. I still do at some point. When I was looking at things, it was like, oh, there's not many. You always hear the stats and stuff, but you just need to see someone. And once you see someone, it just inspires you to keep going. So I think for me, actionable change, step one is to get where I want to, where I want to see people. But if I might not see a C-suite leader, but it's going to be difficult, but why not? Let's try and get there. So someone else, the next me, can see, oh, there is someone there. And then along those same lines, that leader also messaged me after the meeting, not his EA, not anyone. He messaged me and said, oh, are you new to LinkedIn? Let's talk. And that, again, my mind was blown. It was like, wow, that's all it can take sometimes. So I think we need to make sure we get there so that we can have the opportunity to help people we want to help. And then also, I think change is about being intentional. So you have to be very intentional with what you do. So when I first joined companies at my stage, I'm a bit like, how much do I want to talk about diversity? I did an interview with Ollie before, and we spoke about loads of different things about diversity within companies. And before I did it, I was thinking, how much do I want to say? Like, how dangerous is it? And then I did it, and I thought, you know what? It's a hard decision to make, but really I'm not being my authentic self if I don't talk about and if I don't say what I really want to say. And every industry now, especially in tech, will tell you to come to work as your authentic self. If they mean it is another question, but we can try our best to do that. And I think being your authentic self and being intentional will help. So every time I talk in anything like this, I just want to be me, because there's other people like me that are in school that don't want to go to the pub either. And hearing me say I'm not going to the pub can make someone else think, you know what, I don't need to go to the pub either. If you do like the pub, go, because it definitely helps. But I can't do it personally. And I think just being intentional with how I come across, being intentional with what I do, and being brave enough, I think, to say, I'm going to talk about diversity and still go to work tomorrow, is a way I think we can help, like, actionably make change.
Very nice. Thank you. So I think we've come to the end of an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you, everyone, thank you to the panelists for sharing your experiences, perspectives, and your insights on being change makers. My intention here now is to potentially have a Q&A session. I've left about 30 minutes or 20 minutes. I think we're tracking well on time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Maria to filter through some of the questions that have come through. And if anyone wants to raise their hand, I think that feature should be available to you to ask a question directly to the panel. You can turn your camera on, you can ask the question. We're all here to share, what we know and engage with you. So I'm going to pivot now to the Q&A section. Maria, are you possibly be able to grab the first question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Olu. Great discussion. Thank you to all the panelists for everything. Now I will start with the first question. So the first question is, what policy would you like to see be considered for the future of DEI in tech? Would someone like to take that question?
I can jump in. I think policy-wise, it has to be, I think policy-wise, what I'd actually like to see for DI in tech is like ground up. So I think it starts at work experience. I think it starts at making sure we are qualified and the best candidate, because that can always, that's an easy like something to say all the time. Oh, but they might not be qualified. So that's the policy I'd like to see. Let's make sure we're all qualified. Let's make sure that STEM is top of mind. Let's make sure that computer science, that when I was in school, I thought computer science was making games. I didn't know that I could be a remote computer science working from Dubai and making loads of money. So I think it's about making sure at that level, I'd like to see some sort of policy that says no more like Blue Ink or like Clark's, all those sorts of places for work experience, but let's get some real work experience, and let's get work experience that exposes us to the real world.
Can I add to this? Oh. Well, I'll add. So thank you for, I agree with you, Theo. But I think also on top of this, what I'd love to see as a policy is, I got quite frustrated after COVID when the layoff hit, and the first one that were hit were D&I teams. That made me feel like, oh, that was a fancy ad to corporation, but there was nothing that really protected those teams. What does that mean, that now it doesn't matter anymore? So I love to see policy on like making sure that they invest really in D&I, and what does that look like also if there's an economic crisis? Is it still at the core of what they do? That's what I love to see.
Yeah, so I'll jump in with a final part. I think first thing I want to preface with policy making is, first thing I'd like to share is, I think, getting diverse voices involved in making those policies and not putting it down to one person, which I know that can happen in a lot of organizations. So I think more of a focus on focus groups, I suppose, to kind of poll ideas and to poll what we want to do before kind of making that change worldwide that might actually affect a lot of people. So I think that just in itself as a start, but I think there's also an element, I think, of training. And I think a policy I really want to see is kind of organizations going with the mindset of, we're going to invest in this person, and we're actually going to invest the amount of times that, and I think startups are also guilty for this as well as corporations, is people get given budgets for learning and development, but people don't know how to use them, or people don't feel confident to use them. And I think there should be, especially for people who want to kind of accelerate in their career further, and for people who want to get to higher up positions, there should be more emphasis on, okay, this is what you want to achieve, this is the skills you want to learn, let's support you into these learning and development courses. And I think it should be down to managers as well to be trained on, okay, well, this is how I'm going to help you to learn these skills that you need for this, and to hold you accountable as well to actually doing it, and making sure I budget time into your workload to make sure you feel empowered to complete it. Rather than, I know of a friend of mine who was supposed to be doing a course to be helping get to the next level of her qualifications for what she needs to do, and she wasn't given any time to do it except the day before for one day of study leave for a whole textbook worth of information. She was like, well, I'm already kind of screwed from this point because I don't have enough time to digest it. So yeah, no, I think the policy side of things, focus group what your ideas are on what you want to change with multiple different voices and people, and also kind of give time into learning and development and helping train people up and making people an investment into your organization, rather than just kind of hoping for the best.
Really great answers. Thank you, panelists. Maria, next question.
Yes, so I have another question that I think is good to follow up with this one. So someone asked in the job interview, how do I ask about the approach to diversity within the company and or the team?
Yes. Can I jump straight in with that one? So it's actually something I've worked on a lot with young people, especially with graduate schemes and going in, because there's, as Theo mentioned earlier, it's like, oh, do I talk about diversity, or is that going to be, it's going to be too much? Am I going to rock the boat? Firstly, you're not rocking the boat. It's your right to ask as a start. But I think one of the subtle ways you can do it is ask, how do you celebrate cultural moments within your organization? So how do you celebrate International Women's Day? How do you celebrate Black History Month? How do you celebrate South Asian Heritage Month? And you can then decide, see what the answer they give you. Do they hesitate? Do they go, oh yeah, well, you know, well, we have a coffee corner to celebrate, and we have some people talk. If they can't answer that clearly for you, then that is your answer. Yeah, there you go. I think that's my 2 cents.
Thanks for being direct with the answer there. I think that's exactly the approach you should take. Theo, Marja, did you want to add anything?
I always ask this question. I've always been asking very difficult questions. Don't forget, when you interview, it's not just you being interviewed, it's interviewing both sides. And for me, a company that can't represent diversity and inclusion it's a red flag, and it shouldn't be on my list, whatever the name is. Well, in my last time where I interviewed was for Pinterest, and I was really pleased that they invested so much, not just on the event side, but also the representation of the panelists that interviewed me, the leadership, where it was extremely diverse, but also in the product itself. They were really thinking about everything to make it more diverse. So don't hesitate to question the company, as remember, you're not just, I know sometimes it feels like, oh, you need a job, so you're putting pressure on yourself, but step back a minute. And at the end of the day, this will help you prioritizing your North Star. Where do you want to go? Your vision. Is this company aligned with my values? That's what I would say.
My answer would probably be to listen to the two answers before, because I think I have always struggled with that, and I probably still would if I had an interview. So I'd probably take on that advice that we just heard.
Awesome. Thank you. Maria, next one. Anyone with their hands up, or you can keep reading from the Q&A. That's fine.
Yeah, I think for now, let's continue with the Q&A. So there's another one, which is, what's your individual thoughts or experiences when it comes to applying for roles with ethnic or unique names? Do you think this has an impact on job success? Because the person who asked the question, they know a few people that had to change their names.
I have a strong opinion on this. Coming from France, where unfortunately there's a lot of stories that I hear about this, which is horrendous. But I've had also a passion. My last name is actually from Mauritius, but people can't really say. Back to what I advised earlier about, you interview that company, this will filter out the company you don't want to be in. If you, back to what Theo was saying, be your authentic self. If they're not happy with your last name, they shouldn't even be on the market. That's like my point of view. I've interviewed years ago in France, where during the interview, it was in English, the lady said, so are you able to write in French, like the grammar in French? And I looked at her because I think she couldn't really understand my last name, where it was coming from. And obviously, I'm not white. And I said, if you actually read my resume, you can see that I'm French, that I studied in France, and I had a master in MBA, actually. So I blacklisted them. My advice is, I know this is why you have Colorintech. This is why you have a BLIX. They will put you through the right organization that are empowering the diversity, and don't lower yourself for companies that may not accept you. Focus on the ones that will celebrate you. That would be my advice.
Amazing. Can I jump in on this as well? Completely agree. Just to say, completely agree. And I think if you have to change your name to get through on a job, absolutely agree. You don't want to be part of that, because you're going to potentially end up code switching and not being your authentic self, which can lead to you being unhappy. And it can lead, I'm not going to say it's going to lead to lots of horrible things, but I know of a colleague of mine who actually hid her religion from the organization when she was applying, and she did change her name. She got in and everything was fine, but then she went into a sales role where, again, she faced a lot of discrimination. So she made sure that every single one of her public profiles she had no images. She changed her name on everything, and that was the only way she could do her role. And as soon as some people found out about who she actually was, they stopped doing business with her. They stopped talking to her, which is outrageous and awful. Fortunately, she decided to leave and move to a different company, which actually valued her for her skills. But if you're having to change anything, then you don't want to be part of that organization to start. However, on another side of things, I've done a lot of graduate recruitment-based activities, especially in previous careers, and we're actually starting to look at some recruitment-based things at Colorintech, so keep your eyes open. But what we have noticed, obviously everybody has an unconscious bias. Every single person does. And everybody needs to work on that. When you notice it, it's very important. And also accept the times where your unconscious bias has come through and learn from it. But I think part of what I've actually really enjoyed in terms of policies is look for organizations that do what's called blind hiring. So what we actually used to do for organizations is we wouldn't hand in a CV to them. What we would ask is we get our candidates to answer questions that got them to demonstrate the skills they would need for the role. And we got them to fill it out, and then we coded them so we knew who it was, obviously, because we need that to be able to progress people. But we handed these forms to the recruiters and said, there you go, you can assess based on these. So there's absolutely no chance of any discrimination on that. And in some cases, and as well, it's worth bearing in mind that some people don't have the same literary skills, or maybe are dyslexic and have trouble with that. Before we submit them, we also speak to them and allow for first drafts as well. So then we were able to help them as much as we could with their answer and to get their point across, so then they were at the least level of disadvantage possible. And obviously I'm saying this, I'm sure not every organization is going to do this, so bear that in mind. But giving kind of feedback and giving that help improves the chances next time. Hopefully that makes sense. But keen to hear Theo's thoughts as well.
So my name is quite straightforward. So it's never really been something I've worried about when applying for roles. I think we would be lying to say it doesn't matter. It probably definitely does. So I think I'd lean to what both Catherine and Marjo said, in that if it does matter, you probably don't want to be there. It's relatively easy for me to say now, because when I was trying to get a job, I would have gone because I really wanted to work in tech. I really wanted a job. Now I'm in it, I can say you probably don't want to work there. But I've also been in places where I probably knew I didn't want to be there and the experience was not nice. So it's easier for me to say now, but having experienced the other side of it, you definitely don't want to be there if your name matters.
Thank you. We've still got lots of questions coming in, so thank you for your answers there. Maria, is there another question that we can pick up for the group?
Yes, absolutely. So there is one that was asked more specifically for Theo, but it's also open to anyone else. So at mentioning that at the start of the discussion, Theo, you mentioned that if you could have a superpower, it would be time travel. And the question is, what skills do you think you could have learned if you could go back to university and do something such as coding? And if that would have made your transition to tech easier, do you think?
I think I would have gone back further than university. So I probably would have made sure I studied computer science at GCSE, at A level, and then still done a marketing degree, because I do really enjoy like product marketing. But being technical does help. But I think the tech industry is so much bigger than technical. For example, at LinkedIn, there's probably less than 20 technical people based in London, in the UK. Most of the roles here are not technical. So I wouldn't say I would have necessarily changed the degree, but I think having the skills of, even if it's like data analytics skills, but having some technical skills, if I could do that, I definitely would. I probably still can do it now, and I've tried a few times, but I'll probably keep trying. But I think, yeah, that's what I would do, but not necessarily change my whole degree.
Thanks for the answer. And there's kind of a follow-up question as well, and I think I can follow up with this one. In general, what is your opinion on code switching in the workplace in tech? And do you think it's necessary to know coding in order to build a career in tech specifically?
I mean, I don't code, but I've worked in tech. You can build businesses. Like my specialty is more marketing and business development. And I went to 0 to 1 in my last job, building a team from a division from scratch and driving revenue 0 to the million. And this is something that you can do in tech. There's so many skill sets. You can work in HR. You don't have to necessarily go to code switching, not code. But yeah, you don't necessarily need just the skill set to be able to work in tech. And there's so many jobs, PMM, for example, project marketing, project itself. So yeah, I think the best is to, like Theo was saying earlier, go and chat with people on LinkedIn, like reach out to them and try to get to know within the organization, what's the structure looking like, what's the skills needed, and then you can shape around that. I don't know if this was what you expected.
So I think, so yes, the person mentioned code switching, and so I don't know, I think maybe they meant like basically when a member of an underrepresented group adjusts their language, the way they talk, their behavior and appearance to fit into the organization. Let me know if that's what the person meant, but I think.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's less about the technical skills. It's actually more about the soft skills in a way.
Same.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, same. I think this is like maybe this is the same thing I was telling earlier, but I know earlier in your career you want to find a job, but when you move a little bit further down your career, you want to find the right fit. And I think thinking about who you are, your values, if it doesn't align with the company you're applying for, why would you want to shape? Of course, you want to grow and learn from feedback. There's a limit to that, but you don't want to completely change because you're different, you're diverse, or, that's what I would say.
But you hit the nail on the head.
I think I was probably code switching up until maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I think it took me a while to say, like, it doesn't matter. And if it does, it won't matter somewhere else, in like very simple terms. I think when I was here, up until my career so far, so I had a full-time job at university working in a startup, and I felt so underqualified that I was like, I need to do everything right. Then I went to eBay and I was like, wow, this was like a big step. I'm at LinkedIn. I was like, wow, this was like a big step. It wasn't until a few months ago that I was able to say, I do my job well. Like, I'm here for a reason. And like a big example for me was I work for a tech company. You can kind of wear what you want to an extent. I would take like 15 minutes to decide what I should wear to work every morning. Now I'll put on shorts, I'll put on slippers. That's what everyone else wears. But I was like, everyone else wears that, but I can't wear that. And it took me a while to feel comfortable enough to say, I'm just gonna be me, and it's gonna do like however it is how it goes. So I think I definitely like resonate with, should I code switch, should I not? And I don't think we should. I think we always will a little bit. Like there's always, I think everyone probably does a little bit. But I think you should try and be as much as yourself as possible. For example, they talk about friends at work. I've never seen friends. The first time I said that, the looks I got were quite crazy. And now I was like, oh, maybe I should just lie. No, I'm like, I haven't seen friends, but I've seen my wife and kids. So it's just different. And I think it's okay to bring that to work, but I understand that it's not as straightforward as just doing it.
Can I jump in on that as well? Completely agree with both of your comments there. And I think the thing with code switching, and I think I do agree with you, I think everybody does a little bit, And I think there is an element of 100% you should be bringing your authentic self to work. But obviously that's within realms. I mean, please don't go in and tell about the rager you did over the last weekend, right? But you absolutely should be yourself and share the things that you love and who you are. But I think what we need to also kind of analyze with this is the company culture that's making you feel like you need to code switch. Is the culture at the organization helping you to be your authentic self? Is it encouraging you to bring your full self to work? Is it giving you a sense of belonging? Because if you are code switching and that is the case, then the problem is not on you, it's on the organization. And it's on their ability to not make you feel safe being yourself at that organization. A good example, I think that's really quite like easy to kind of notice this in a smaller scale is, as Theo said about what you wear to work, a lot of people pulling you up. I remember start of my career, one of the organizations I worked at, if you weren't wearing socks, as an example, even if you were wearing shoes that didn't necessarily need socks, you were pulled up. And they were like, no, you've got to change. And again, it was kind of little comments of like, one day I was wearing less makeup to work just because, one, I was tired and didn't want to. And I got pulled up on it and like, oh, you don't look as professional as you normally do. And I'm like, well, what does professional look like? Like, you know, and it's challenging that. And I think it's understanding that it's not necessarily you, and it might be a culture thing, and just kind of really to think and analyze that.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you for the question. I think that's one of my favorite questions because to add to what has already been said, you know, we've all had that kind of concept thrown at us, whether we like it or not. So it's really important that, you know, you get as great a fit as you can in any role that you're going to be, but bring your best self. And usually being your best self, as a mentor of mine has reminded me, is being your natural self. But just like you would meeting somebody for the first time, you know, you just got to, you know, tune it to however you feel you might best be received. So yeah, that's something I think we'll all continue to do going forward. So I'm just going to call out that we've got 5 minutes left. There's still a few questions. So Maria, I think we've probably got time for one or two. So if you could pick a couple for us, that'd be great.
Okay, yes, sounds good. So yes, so let's go with this one. There's a bit of context that I will give first. So this particular person, they've been working in a tech company as a graduate for about a year now, and they say that the diversity in the company is quite low. And even though the people around them are nice and supporting, they struggle to bring their full self to work. And the question is, how do they tackle this as a first year graduate with little direct support?
I would say there's not any pressure. Don't think you're the only person that's not being your authentic self. Like I said, I wasn't doing it for like 2 years. So I think it's important to understand that it's not just you. Lots of people are doing it, and it will come out when it's time to come out. So definitely take your time with it, and it might be bit by bit. It might be first you just start talking a bit more. Like I didn't really, when they asked how my weekend was, I didn't really talk. That was like an easy way for me to start. Just actually, how was my weekend? If I went to a house party somewhere, I'm just telling them I went to a house party instead of saying, oh, I didn't do anything. So I think you can just start small and like work your way up to it. But there's definitely no pressure to say I need to be my authentic self next week.
Yeah, to echo on that, absolutely agree, Theo. Like, it's not your responsibility to do it. And also, I think that there is also an element of not forcing it as well. I think there was at a previous organization I was at, every Monday morning, we were all forced into breakout rooms and we had to tell everybody what we did on our weekends. And then we had to rate them when we came back to the main room, which is kind of like, you know, it's kind of daunting as well, especially if you're early on, because you're like, oh, well, what am I allowed to say, right? Like you say, I went to a house party. Do I say that? And also it's kind of that fear of, oh, am I being boring? Like, do people want to listen to the fact that I went to a bookshop and, you know, bought loads of books, which is usually my weekend. But but it kind of creates that pressure. So I think it's being mindful of not to force it. Kind of, I think from a personal note, I think it really helps to kind of find maybe one or two people